What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Behind Show. And today I'm joined by Braeden Guthrie, also known as Bengals NFL on Instagram. How you doing today, Braeden?
No, I'm doing great. It's a great time of the year. Free agency is happening. The draft's coming up in right around a month. So it's just a great time to be a football and a Bengals fan.
Yeah, this off season, the free agency for the Bengals is just really weird to me because it's one of those situations where you have a general idea what the Bengals are going to do, and they're going to do a complete 180. Everything that we thought was going to happen did not happen. Everything that we did not think was going to happen did happen. Whether it was really everything was surprising except for losing Jesse Bates. Everything else is kind of caught off guard type of deal. But I kind of talked about it briefly, on my last show I did a couple of days ago. But what are your kind of initial thoughts and reactions with the Bengals signing Orlando Brown?
Yeah, honestly, I love it. I know that's what we were expecting. And heck, if you would have told me an hour before that this was about to happen, I would have probably laughed in your face. So, as you kind of mentioned, very unexpected, but I really like it because we've been having left tackle issues since Andrew Whitworth left, and they just haven't been able to find a viable option, whether if it's drafting or signing those kind of medium guys like Cordy Glenn a few years ago, which it kind of worked for a few games, but then the long term plan there got exposed. So the Bengals at some point needed to just get a proven left tackle who has the ability to protect Burrow's blind side and help the running game. I just like they say, no, this is what we need to do. We need to swallow our pride of what we think what we can do from learning from the past, and we just got to go sign the guy. So I love that's exactly what they did.
And this was one of those situations where, like I was saying, just completely unexpected. This came out of freaking nowhere. There was no rumors, there was no talks, there was nothing about it that made you think that the Bengals were going to sign uh, Orlando Brown. And when you look at the prior offseason, Orlando Brown was offered a 5-year contract, an average salary of 23 per season, and the Bengals signed him 4 for 64. We basically got Orlando Brown for what Jesse Bates' contract was, with him signing what the Atlanta Falcons 4 for 64, 16 per year. And I'm not going to lie, heading into the offseason, I know it might sound stupid. I did not want Orlando Brown, mainly because when you look at Jawan Taylor and guys like McGlinchey and Taylor, guys who really had 1-2 good years, if they're getting 20 plus million, I was really nervous what Orlando Brown was going to get, of the possibility of him going to Cincinnati. But the fact that the Bengals got him on such a steal of a signing, to me, I was definitely excited for this. And like you said, when you look at the left tackle situation, it's been horrendous with Jonah Williams, Aboyhe, Cordy Glenn. This is by far the best tackle we've had since Whitworth. And it's just so crazy because we did not think this was going to happen. This is a Bengals offensive line. I tell stuff how it is. When the Bengals suck, I'm going to say they're going to suck. If they play good, I'm going to say that they play good. This offensive line was not nearly as bad as people thought the second half of the year. The second half of the year, they were not great, but they were really good and way better than people thought they were. There was, I believe, like a 10-game stretch or 9-game stretch where the Bengals did not allow 3 sacks or something crazy like that. And then you added the fact Orlando Brown, a 4-time Pro Bowler, to this offensive line. I am so freaking excited for this signing, and it's one of those things you didn't think was going to happen, but you're so glad it ended up happening for Cincinnati.
Yeah, and as you just kind of mentioned, it was basically the money they didn't use on Jesse Bates, and I love Jesse Bates, but I'm taking that Orlando Brown contract over Jesse Bates every day when you throw in positional value and what the offense needs. So the Bengals certainly made the right decision there. It sucks to see Jesse go, but they just didn't spend the money. They used the money they didn't need for somebody and use it on somebody they needed it. That's just a great job by the Bengals front office by not panicking and just kind of being smart, not rushing into things, because of course fans were freaking out when the Bengals didn't sign anybody within the first hour. It just shows that you don't need to rush into these moves. If you don't rush, if you do the math, or maybe doing the math isn't the right example, but if you don't rush it, you have plenty of time to find these top tier free agents. If you work on it smoothly, like how the Blackbirds and Tobin did, you're going to find free agents who want to come to Cincinnati. And Orlando Brown even kind of mentioned, yeah, this isn't as much money as the other guys, but I want to be here because I know this is a winning team.
Exactly. When you look at the Bengals, that whole situation, the Bengals don't make a move in an hour. They don't make a splashy move in a day or two. Bengal fans are freaking out. Oh, we're going to suck. We're going to be bad this year. I mean, people like P. Ryan. I was surprised that he left, but the way people were overreacting about a freaking backup running back leaving was just ridiculous. The amount of overreacting this fan base had throughout free agency was crazy. The sky's falling down type of deal. And, like you said, this is kind of something the Bengals are used to. They don't overreact to signing. They don't rush deals. They don't really, make a splashy move the first day or so. Really, time you don't think about that is when they did it with DJ Reader and Trey Waynes. But the Bengals take their time. They let the market come to them. They don't go after the market. They let the market come to them. They wait things out, see how things go. But I still cannot believe they ended up signing Orlando Brown. Such a great sign here for Cincinnati, 4 for 64. Will Lewis, or you could look at it, they were only paying Brown 4 more per year than Jonah Williams is getting. I honestly think the Bengals would be happy to trade Williams and free up $12.4 million. And that's the thing to me. Like, that's crazy. When you look at Orlando Brown, I mean, I guess we'll go ahead and talk about Jonah Williams because I cannot wait till he leaves Cincinnati. When you look at Orlando Brown and you look at Jonah Williams, all the offseason this past year, I would not shut up about Jonah Williams. He sucks. He's not nearly as good as people thought. People need to start, talking, more bad about him for a guy who was a first-round pick who was not remotely close lived up to his first-round pick back in 2019. Jonah Williams this past season gave up 13 sacks. The last 5 seasons, Orlando Brown's gave up 14 sacks. Orlando Brown has only gave up 1 more sack than Jonah Williams has just last year and in 5 years of Jonah Williams. Orlando Brown gave up only 1 more sack in 5 seasons than Jonah Williams did all of this last season. It's absolutely crazy that Orlando Brown's getting less than $4 million more per year than what Jonah Williams is getting this year. This is a significant upgrade. And when you look at Jonah Williams, when you look at the Bengals signing Orlando Brown, it's interesting because I feel like this kind of could be said. Maybe the reason why Orlando Brown did not get paid as much is because he's strictly only going to play left tackle. He's made it, public and open that he does not want to play right tackle. He's only going to play left tackle. Maybe that's why Orlando Brown did not get paid as much money. But, that helped the Bengals because Orlando Brown did not get paid as much. But also, when you look at Jonah Williams, that also hurts the Bengals because Jonah Williams, with them signing Orlando Brown, the intention was Jonah Williams is going to play right tackle until Leo Collins comes back. He's pretty much been known he has no intention to play right tackle. But when you look at Jonah Williams, if he's only going to play left tackle, that hurts the Bengals' trade value because if he was open to play right tackle and he already plays left tackle, that brings a higher trade value because he's versatile. He can play multiple positions. But the fact that he's pretty much strictly staying at left tackle kind of hurts the Bengals' trade opportunities there. But we're talking about a guy who's making $12.4 million this upcoming season. He is a bust. He's played freaking terrible the last 2 years. The last 2 years, he's gave up 23 sacks. There's no excuses for him. At some point, people need to start realizing he's been really, really bad the past couple of years. The Bengals should move on from him. But realistically, the Bengals should move on for him. But realistically, if the Bengals are not offered a day 2 pick, a second or third round pick, I don't think the Bengals are going to move on from Jonah Williams. Let's think about this for a second. When you look at the Bengals, they do not often trade their own players for draft picks. Back in the rebuilding stages of 2018, 19, around that time frame, the Bengals had such a prime opportunity to get so many draft picks in return for guys like Andy Dalton, A.J. Green, Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap. They traded Dunlap, but they got pocket change for him. If they traded him a year or two before, they would have got so much more in return. Multiple other players, guys like Tyler Eifert around that time frame who had expiring contracts that year. The Bengals are not used to trading their players for draft picks. I would love it if the Bengals were able to trade. I don't care. I would love it if the Bengals were able to trade Jonah Williams for anything because that frees up $12.4 million. And as of yesterday, if they were to trade Jonah Williams, that would make them second highest in cap space in the NFL. A team who just signed Orlando Brown, who just signed a decent safety in Nick Scott, a team who's been in the AFC Championship game the last 2 seasons, and then they have the second highest cap space in the NFL if they're able to get a deal done with Jonah Williams. I want this to happen so bad. Realistically, though, I don't think it'll happen, but I'm all for Jonah Williams leaving Cincinnati. I absolutely hope he's not on this team this upcoming season.
Yeah, I don't think the Bengals will, as you kind of hinted at, will take anything less than a day 2 pick. I think the way the Bengals will look at it, for one, as you said, they're not used to trading their own players. They'll only do it if they see like a obvious opportunity that advantages them over the other team. So I think they're going to see it as Jonah can't decide that he's staying at left tackle. He can say that, but if the Bengals don't trade him, he's getting stuck at right tackle, whether if he likes it or not. And I don't think Jonah would be toxic or cancer about it, or whatever word you want to say about it. I think he would get to that position, not create something bad. But at the same time, the Bengals are thinking, okay, we're just going to get more value out of Jonah Williams than we are for a 5th or a 4th round pick. I think that's the way the Bengals are looking at it. And yeah, him going public, he's really been public about this since the Bengals drafted him, about him being at left tackle. And I completely agree that does not help his trade value. But where this could have potentially advantaged the Bengals is the first wave of offensive tackle prospects in the draft is really good. But after that first wave, there is a significant drop-off. So that we could maybe see a trade on draft day where a team in the first round misses out on an offensive tackle. They may not have great option. They may not like who's there. So they just may be like, you know what, we can't have this guy at right tackle. There's nobody we have in the draft. We need this to happen now. So you could get a team who's perhaps a little too patient and then kind of freak out. As we keep mentioning, the Bengals just aren't going to do something to do it. They're going to let it come to them. They're going to wait until they see something they like. So, yeah, I completely agree. It's going to be a day 2 pick. It's not going to be a day 3 pick, unless if it's maybe an early 4th round pick. Even then, I think that's a bit far-fetched. The Bengals still I don't know if like's the right word. They still think Jonah can be a valuable starter. And so they're going to not be giving him off for pennies. They're going to, like we keep saying, they're going to have their own demand for him, and that might be one not a lot of teams are looking for. But the nice thing in a league of 32 teams, it just takes one team to get overzealous or just over panicking, or whatever word you want to use. So there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages to the Bengals in this situation. And it's truly hard to predict what's going to happen next because there's so many ups and so many downs. And also Jonah's injury history is also something to remember when talking about this trade. So yeah, honestly, I have no prediction of what will happen. I know Ian Rappaport on the Pat McAfee show said it could happen soon. If I had to guess, it would be during draft weekend, probably day of round 2, because obviously round 1 isn't happening. But this is what makes offseason so frustrating. We don't know if or when Jonah Williams is going to be traded, and that also leaves the Bengals with question marks at that offensive tackle spot as well.
And when you look at the situation, this is a situation that the Bengals shouldn't be in, but I kind of am that they are because of the fact that you can get a draft pick if you're wanting to trade Williams that bad. But it's one of those situations, like we're saying, when you look at the Bengals, they don't trade their players very often, and they're not trading. I would not imagine they're going to trade a day 3 pick, trade Jonah Williams for a day 3 pick, because Williams playing at right tackle, depending how long that would be, that's still going to be more valuable than that day 3 pick as of right now. But when you look at Will Lewis here, or you could be a conditional pick for a 2024 draft, where the round depends on how many snaps he takes, like a 4th, that will become a 3rd based on percentage snaps. That's something interesting as well I was going to bring up. We're talking about the Bengals don't trade players. The Bengals overvalue their players at times. When you look at the Bengals, let's say 2020, 2019, when the Bengals, in 2019, 2018, we were kind of in the rebuild stage, they would have been better off trading guys like Dalton, Green, Atkins, Dunlap, these guys. I know Bengal fans did not want it to happen, but you would have acquired draft picks much more around that time frame than the years following that. I know we traded. I know I said that we traded Dunlap for basically nothing, but we could have got so much in return. But the Bengals overvalued the players because there was rumors during the 2018 or 19 season that Dalton. There was talks about teams wanting a second or third round pick for him. The Bengals should have been all over that because around that time you'd have to realize Dalton was not going to be the plans a quarterback for Cincinnati. Look at John Ross's final season with the Bengals. The Bengals decided to keep John Ross instead of trading him, and keep John Ross in hopes of getting a compensatory pick for him. They did not get a compensatory pick for him. They didn't play him at all. That situation just made no sense to me. You could have got something. Instead, you took a risk and a gamble, and you got absolutely nothing because you overvalued your players. And I just feel like this is another situation. Honestly, even if the Bengals got offered a third-round pick, I don't know if I could 100% confidently say that the Bengals would accept that trade. If I'm the Bengals, I totally would. But the Bengals have a history of, they have to be the winners of a deal. When you look at Carson Palmer back in 2011, they got a first and second round pick for that. That was a crazy trade. When you go some of these other trades, the Bengals have to be the clear winners of trades or they're not willing to do it. When you traded Billy Price to get B.J. Hill, Billy Price was a bust. He did not live up to the hype at all. He only had 1 year left in this deal. B.J. Hill, he played with the Giants, I think, when Lou Anarumo was back on the Giants as well. So there was a connection there. The Bengals won that trade because there was still potential in B.J. Hill, and he's been really good for us. So when you look at the Bengals, when they've done trades, they have to be the clear winners of it. They have to be the more advantaged team with the trades. They have to be the winners of it, or they're not really going to do it. I hope we trade Williams. I don't think we will, but this is another situation where I definitely think the Bengals could overvalue a player. They don't make a trade, and that player, you don't make that trade, and they could have been better off trading that player to get a draft pick.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see if the Bengals front office has learned from its past. Just a few minutes ago, we were complimenting them about the market in Orlando Brown, but now this is something completely different. So we're going to have to see if they've learned from their past mistakes. Hopefully, with it being more the Taylor era now, we talked about 2018, that was Marvin's last year, and 2019, the transition year. So hopefully with the Bengals having more established coaches, the front office growing and showing a lot of improvement since then, hopefully they have learned from their mistakes and will make that trade and not reject a third-round pick. If they only get offered day 3 picks and reject those, I'm not mad at them. I completely understand why they would do that. But if they reject day 2 picks, then that would be very frustrating.
It's something that is definitely possible for Cincinnati to do, and it's just so aggravating because, Jonah Williams has been a bust so far, and, Orlando Brown comes in, the intention he's going to play right tackle. He takes the easy way out and asks for a trade, not even pretty much attempting, not even going to attempt to, left tackle, I was bad there, but I can make up for it and improve playing right tackle. He just takes the easy way out and asks for a trade. Really stupid move by Jonah Williams there, but it's going to be interesting to see what plays out with Jonah Williams in Cincinnati. But like you said earlier, if he's not traded, he's going to play right tackle until La'el Collins comes back, whether he likes it or not. But when you look at the Bengals, there's been, signings. There's been, talks about, Williams getting traded. Orlando Brown was signed. There's people talking about, Joe Mixon. What if he got cut? But a couple of days ago, the Bengals signed safety Nick Scott to a 3-year deal. What are your kind of thoughts, initial reactions on this signing?
So, yeah, first reaction was I love that contract. It's such a team-friendly deal. It gives them the ability to sign another safety better than him. Scott can be your third safety rotational guy. You can put him in the box as a coverage linebacker in those obvious passing situations, although his strength's obviously more, as I said, in the box, kind of like Von Bell, laying the hood better in the running game, has shown coverage ability, and I think in Lou's defense will be able to adjust that. But I think this is a really good signing. I just hope the Bengals aren't sold on the safety position. I do think they need another safety in there, one better than Scott and obviously better than Dax and Hill, because going from Jesse Bates to Bell to Dax Hill and Dax Hill and Scott is a noticeable downgrade. So I really like the contract. I really like the signing as long as the Bengals still have intentions of getting another safety, which that market is shrinking though.
That's kind of my thoughts on that too. When you look at the signing Scott, 3-year deal worth $12 million, really a team friendly deal, and it's one of those situations. If he were to get 8 or 9 million per year, that kind of takes away the odds of the Bengals getting another safety. But the fact that it's so cheap, there's still that up in the air discussion. Maybe they sign another safety. And when you look at Daxton Hill, I like the pick. I was, hoping he was going to play more last year. It's upset he didn't, and it just makes no sense to me. I've said this a couple of times, but with the Bengals, it was evident that Jesse Bates was not going to resign the moment they drafted Daxton Hill, and then Von Bell leaves. Situations like this, the Bengals are currently in. I don't know why they did not play Daxton Hill more, because they knew they knew Bates was going to leave. He should have been more prepared last season, heading into this year. Von Bell shot everybody and left Cincinnati. And when you look at the most safety snaps the last 3 years, Von Bell and Jesse Bates are 2 and 3 for the most safety snaps the last 3 years for safeties. We lost both of them. It's going to be a hard hole to fill for both of those guys leaving. Nick Scott, he's going to come in and play hopefully good for us. Daxton Hill, he's played only 2 defensive snaps last year, only 2 games with 10 defensive snaps or more last year. I feel like he should have been more experienced heading into this year. But I would not be upset if the Bengals signed another safety. But like you said, it seems like the market is shrinking so fast. But I would not be opposed to maybe drafting a safety, maybe in the 3rd or 4th round, depending who's available. But it's another one of those situations where if you draft that safety, he's not even going to be that much more inexperienced than Daxton Hill is. You're trying to develop Daxton Hill. You get another rookie, you got to develop somebody else. If you have Scott out there, and if you have Hill out there, you're taking snaps away from a guy you're going to develop. If you have that 3rd round pick out there with Scott, he's probably going to be taking away snaps from Daxton Hill. So it's a really interesting situation that I don't think the Bengals, or really us, kind of thought the Bengals would want to be put in this offseason with Von Bell leaving for Carolina. But I don't know. This is very interesting to me. Like you said, even though the Bengals signed Nick Scott to a 3-year deal, I definitely don't think it rules out them, not signing a safety. I would like for them to get another safety, but it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, and while the market is shrinking, there are still a few guys. Like, for example, they brought Taylor Rapp into a visit, and he went on another visit after, but we don't know if the visit went bad or if he's doing his due diligence. So there has been evidence that the Bengals are still interested in safeties in the market. So maybe this is another situation where they're not feeling pressure on it. They think they have time to sign somebody else, and they're just going to work it out. And then when the deal finally comes, the deal finally comes. Hopefully they don't sit on their hands too long. And I'm just hoping they do sign another safety. Obviously, it isn't going to be a top-tier guy, but I'd like to see somebody with just more experience, leadership, because that is also another underrated fact about Jesse Bates and Von Bell. There is such leaders on that defense, especially Von Bell. So not only are you losing experience, veterans, you're also losing a leadership members of those teams, which can obviously be fixed. They can do that, but they're going to want to get somebody else so you can have a confident team there and not leave just cashing in Scott.
And when you look at the Bengals, it's interesting because if I'm the Cincinnati, I definitely would have offered the contract that Bell got from Carolina. If I'm Cincinnati, I would have offered that to Bell. And when you look at Bell and when you look at Jermaine Pratt, their contracts are very similar, based on the years and based on the money per year. So if you were the Bengals and if you have one of those contracts, if you're able to offer one to Bell or Pratt, basically they're the same contract, who would you have offered it to?
I would have done Pratt. I think just that linebacker core of Pratt and Wilson is one of the best in the NFL. And even though it was just his contract year, Pratt has still shown improvement year by year. And there's no reason to expect that for that to stop. He's, I want to say 26 years old, maybe 27. Proof is by the time he's done with his second contract, he's still going to be under 30 years old. So you still got a lot of untapped potential with Jermaine Pratt. I think I'm hoping the Bengals give him some more third down snaps, which I think his coverage is underrated. And those tweets, obviously tweets like that, we were all so confident we were going to lose Jermaine Pratt. Turns out, don't look too much into Twitter. Maybe one of these days we'll all learn that lesson. But I think Pratt just plays a bigger part in this defense. No disrespect to Von Bell at all, because he played a huge part too. But what it comes down to is what player is easier to replace. And I do think it's easier to replace Von Bell than Jermaine Pratt.
And I agree. I've said it before. When you look at the most important positions in the league, it's quarterback, linebacker, backup quarterback. And you cannot afford to lose Jermaine Pratt, a guy who, the first year and second year, you knew the potential was there. He just didn't really get it together. But the 2021 season, he had a breakout year. He was phenomenal for us. And then you can make a case that this past season he was even better this year than he was the year prior. Like, he's improved his tackling total every single year that he's played. And when you look at him, when you look at Cincinnati, if you were to lose Bell, you have Akeem Davis-Gaither and Logan Wilson free agents next year. So if you would have lost out on Jermaine Pratt, and then you would have lost out on Logan Wilson the following free agency, you're screwed. Like, you're in some deep crap. And then when you look at Cincinnati, like you said, I feel like they can afford to lose Von Bell more than Pratt because Pratt is younger. I think he has more potential at this point. Von Bell was really good for us. This past year was definitely his best year with Cincinnati, but he's older, and linebackers, safeties are easier to replace than linebackers. I mean, the Bengals got Jesse Bates in the second round. The Bengals have got George Aloka in the fifth round. When the Bengals have drafted safeties, there's a good chance they're going to be decent. Linebackers, I mean, they can be good, but I don't think you can really say that as much compared to the Bengals drafting a safety. But I like Bell more than Pratt, but I understand why the Bengals, ended up signing Pratt for that money instead of Bell. It made more sense, and I really think it really helps his team more in the future, by signing Pratt to the contract rather than Bell to that contract.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be a lot of short-term effect with losing Von Bell. Just as we said, that experience, being the second or third most snaps as a safety, just losing that no matter what the talent level is, it hurts because you need that football IQ, which we know Jesse Bates and Von Bell have a very high one. You need to just have those instincts, which we know while he's not the world's best safety, we know Nick Scott has those instincts. We've seen him read plays, even if his coverage isn't the world's greatest. He's a very smart football player. He's unlikely to make a massive mistake. Obviously, mistakes happen here and there, but he's not a liability, even if he's not the best, which is something good for the Bengals. But yeah, short term, the Bengals safety spot is hurting next year, as we keep talking about. And while Jermaine Pratt is going to be amazing, he's not the one covering half the field. He's not, especially with second year player now. But so in those passing games, and when the Bengals play the Chiefs, if Lamar Jackson's on the Ravens still, even though he's mostly running, he will sling it down. When you're facing those top tier quarterbacks and who are going to want to throw it down the field, losing a guy like Von Bell and Jesse Bates is really going to hurt. So yeah, for reasons like that, it's trying to beat the best quarterbacks. I agree that in this sense, losing Von Bell hurts more than Jermaine Pratt.
I'm still completely shocked that Bell left, but I'm just surprised with Pratt staying as I was surprised with Bell leaving. Like, it's so crazy. You thought for sure Bell was going to leave. You thought for sure Pratt was going to leave, he stayed. You thought for sure Bell was going to stay, he left. It was very, very surprising. I cannot believe the Bengals got Jermaine Pratt on such a cheap deal. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do with safety, with losing Von Bell and Jesse Bates. Like we both said, we'd like to get a safety and and experienced safety. If they draft one, it's going to be interesting. If they do draft one, I would really, really, really like J.L. Skinner from Boise State. He's like a reincarnation of Georgia Loca. He plays exactly like him. He's a hard hitter, played at Boise State. If he's there in the third round, he's going to be probably the best player available. But on the Bengals, I probably make that selection, but it's one of those things, like I mentioned, that's another safety you're going to have to develop, and it's a whole, mess there. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But, with the Bengals, they've signed Nick Scott, they've signed Orlando Brown, and there's still, room open with cap space that they can sign some other players. So are there any other, free agent targets that for the Bengals that you think they should be looking at here?
In terms of, so obviously safety still one, and the other big one is tight end right now. Obviously the Bengals lost Hayden Hurst, which Hayden Hurst signing a 3-year deal tells us why the Bengals didn't sign him. They wanted to get a tight end on a 1-year deal, and it sucks losing Hayden Hurst, but I'm also really happy for him. He's been a journeyman his whole career, so glad he finally got a multi-year contract with a team. But I think for tight ends and targets, I think we need to take a look at old teammate of Joe Burrow's, kind of the hot name right now for the Bengals, Moreau. Obviously played with him at LSU. He would be kind of like Hayden Hurst, where he would just be a gap player. But you know what? Having a guy like him, he keeps the offense afloat. He keeps the offense where it is. If you put in a guy like, let's say, destiny of Keelan Carter happens and he's here, going from Hurst to him really hurts this offense. Going from Hurst to Moreau, that doesn't hurt as much. Sure, you may see a slight drop-off, but nothing that's going to really change the Bengals offense. And I think he's one of probably the best tight end on the market now, right since Schultz got signed to the Texans. I believe it was yesterday. If we would have asked me this 24 hours ago, I would have said Schultz. But, yeah, kind of like safety, the tight end market has really shrunk down. The Bengals have limited options. And it seems like Moreau has taken his time. He's been on multiple visits. So, but I think the Bengals need to get that contract done. You need a tight end. You can't go into the draft relying on getting a starting tight end there. So, you can get Moreau on a 1-year deal pretty cheap. I think they could get him for $5, maybe $6 million, since he's not an overly established player. He's established in the sense where he proved he can play. He can be a solid piece in a good offense, but he's not one of these top-tier tight ends, obviously. So I think the Bengals should give him the 1-year deal, say, hey, look what happened to Uzama, look what happened to Hurts after playing with Burrow. You have a chance to make yourself really popular. You can create a name for yourself here, and I'm sure Moreau wants that as well. That may be part of the reason why he's taking so long. I could see him being offered 1-year deals or multi-year deals, where the 1-year deals may be a tad lower, but long run he's thinking, okay, let's say now he's getting offered average 6 per year, and if the Bengals are getting 4, he could be like, okay, yeah, that's less money for this year, but I think I could do what Hayden Hurst does and put my value to $8 million, and next thing you know, that's more money in the long term. So that's my long way of saying we don't know why the Bengals haven't signed him yet. There could be many reasons, but he's probably my favorite free agent for the Bengals right now, just because of that gaping hole at tight end.
And it's interesting because when you look at free agency, it seems like there's probably about one player. There's lots of hype that the Bengal fans want to get. And last year or the year before was Joe Tooney. And there's lots of offensive line in the past couple of years. Now, it's weird heading into the offseason. You did not think it was going to be Foster Monroe. It's just weird how this offseason has played out. But when you look at him, he is a much, 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 much better blocker than Hayden Hurst. He's comparable when it comes to yards. It's honestly kind of impressive because when you look at him, he's not a pass-catching tight end compared to Hurst, but he still has comparable numbers to Hurst. He has the connection with Joe Burrow, so it makes sense. It'll be a safe signing for Cincinnati. If they sign him to a 1-year deal, I don't think that rules out with them maybe taking a tight end, maybe round 2 or 3. I still don't think maybe it rules out them getting Michael Myers. He's there in round 1. That's a whole other discussion. But when you look at Monroe, it would be a smart and safe signing for Cincinnati. Irv Smith Jr. to me, I don't think he's been signed yet. He's had some injury issues here recently. I don't think that'd be a bad signing here. A guy who has not really lived up to being a first round pick several years ago, but I feel like he can come into Cincinnati and be pretty well for us. But tight end, like you said, it's kind of like the glaring hole for this Bengals team right now. Backup quarterback, I've said this many times, Bengals need a better backup quarterback. Braeden Allen is not it. I don't feel comfortable with the Bengals in the game where Braeden Allen is playing and Joe Burrow's on the bench being injured. When you look at the backup quarterback market, it's kind of another market that's kind of shrinking as well. Dalton signed with the Panthers, Minshew signed with the Colts. I really like that signing there. Going back with the Shane Steichen familiarity. But Teddy Bridgewater, to me, is a guy the Bengals should be looking at for a backup quarterback. I know he's not great. He's not amazing by any means. But when it comes to backup quarterbacks, Bridgewater is probably a top 5 backup quarterback in the league. He's miles ahead of Braeden Allen. Braeden Allen is just not good. I just do not want him to be the backup quarterback for the Bengals this upcoming season. Bridgewater would be great. And I know, lots of Bengal fans are talking about maybe Foster Monroe, maybe Irv Smith Jr., Austin Hooper, Michael Mayer, Darnell Washington. It's so interesting. There's so many tight ends that Bengal fans are talking about. And when it comes to the Bengals signing players or trading with players, drafting, whatever, I always like to think of just players outside the box that, aren't really mentioned, much. One player I think the Bengals should be looking at for, is this likely? Probably not, because that means they'd have to trade a draft pick. And, we know in the past, the Bengals aren't really – a team that really trades draft picks for players often. But one player the Bengals I think they should be looking at here is Brevin Jordan. You just said Dalton Schultz was signed with the Houston Texans yesterday on a 1-year deal worth $9 million. Brevin Jordan is a tight end who hasn't really, lived up to, a top pick a couple years ago. There was lots of hype around him. Some Bengal fans wanted the Bengals to get him, in the mid-rounds back in the 2021 draft. And when you look at Brevin Jordan, he has a lot of potential. He's not played a ton. I believe he has less than 40 catches in 2 years at Houston. This past season, he was overshadowed by, tight end. So now he's going to be overshadowed by Dalton Schultz. Clearly, Dalton Schultz is going to be the top tight end weapon for the Houston Texans with a new head coach in Houston. When you look at Brevin Jordan, you don't know how their coaches are going to have their viewpoint on Brevin Jordan. Maybe they want somebody else. And this is a Houston Texans team who loves draft picks. They have so many draft picks from the Deshaun Watson trade. They got 2 more draft picks from Brandon Cooks being traded to the Dallas Cowboys. The Texans are acquiring draft picks because they're a rebuilding team, and the Bengals were to give the Houston Texans like a late 3rd or 4th round pick for Brevin Jordan. I would all be for that. I would rather have an experienced guy than a guy who has no playing experience at all. Brevin Jordan, to me, is somebody the Bengals should be targeting and calling Houston Texans about to figure out their tight end situation.
Yep. Like you said, the Bengals don't like doing it, but we have also seen them doing it. They really think it's for the right price. They will do it. So, and I really love that point. I didn't even think about that until you brought that up, but that's something where the Bengals could get really good value. Send a late 4th, early 5th round pick their way. His market isn't that high. The Bengals can use the signing of Schultz against them and be like, hey, look, clearly you don't see any value in him. This isn't the most valuable position in the world. So you can either just lose him, or you could take a draft pick and see if you can do something. Obviously, if this was an offensive tackle situation that we may have been talking about similar things earlier, you don't do that. But for a backup tight end, somebody who is a backup, why not take the 5th round pick in that situation? They've shown that he's not in their long-term plans, and when you're rebuilding like the Texans, you want those draft picks. It's probably not going to get much higher than a 4th round pick if I had to guess. So I think they would just be like, you know what, we want the draft capital, let's do it.
And it's possible. I just don't think it's likely because, like we've said, the Bengals don't really, trade much. They, like we said, kind of towards the beginning of the show, they only trade where they're the clear winners. And this is a situation where I think they would be the clear winners, but you don't know if it will actually happen or not. I feel like, they're probably going to be trying to get Foster Monroe to come to Cincinnati much, much, much before they would be looking at a guy like Brevin Jordan. But Brevin Jordan's a guy who had so much potential coming out. He just hasn't really, played a ton. A rebuilding team for Houston, maybe acquiring picks from Cincinnati. If it's a fourth-round pick, I would do it. If it's a fifth-round pick, I'm doing that 100% of the time. But that's somebody else I think the Bengals should be looking at here. And it's interesting because, I know some Bengal fans, they were kind of upset that Hayden Hurst left. But, I feel like that was the right move by Cincinnati, just not re-signing him to a 3-year deal for Hayden Hurst. I feel like that would have been excessive for Cincinnati. If they would have signed Hayden Hurst, I was hoping it was going to be for a 1-year deal, maybe worth 5 or 6, something like that. I'm honestly kind of surprised that he signed for as big as a deal that what he got, signing a 3-year deal worth about 21 with Carolina. But when you look at the Bengals, it's so kind of crazy. Like when you look at the Bengals, there's still – multiple positions, they can go in free agency despite, getting Orlando Brown, many considered the top free agent in all of free agency. Nobody thought that was going to happen. They signed Nick Scott to replace Von Bell. But at free agency in Cincinnati, to me, just the way things are right now, I don't think the Bengals are done. I don't know what they're going to do, but I still think the Bengals might have a good signing or two in them left.
Oh, yeah, completely agree. They can't go into the draft with not having a tight end signed, no matter who they may sign at tight end. I am 99% sure they will have signed an outside free agent by the time of the draft. So I do think at some point before the draft, we will see a tight end signing. Could just be Carter for all we know. But so I think we'll definitely see a tight end. And I am still pretty confident the Bengals are going to sign another safety. I think the Bengals front office and staff is too smart to know to think that going into the draft of only 2 known safety, only one of them being established, is not a recipe for success. So I definitely think we'll see a safety as well. Running back, I'm more up in the air about. So really more proven now. The Bengals have been trying to replace Ryan right now and not Mixon. And, the running back market isn't huge, but there's guys out there. So, and they're going to be looking for a Ryan like back with a back who will take a Ryan like contract because Bengals offered Ryan the exact same the Broncos did, and he chose Denver. So that shows wasn't a money situation, so the Bengals have the money to pay, and I'm sure there's going to be one running back out there be like, hey, yeah, I'll take this money and play with Joe Burrow, especially since they probably hear the rumors that Mixon's getting cut. That could be a really great opportunity for them. Get put in a new offense with Joe Burrow, with the running backs that have not been the top in the league but have had success with the potential running back being off the team. That could be a really good scenario for any running back. So if I had to bet on it, I do think they'll sign a running back before the draft, but I'm not as confident in that. So those are the 3 positions I personally think the Bengals will sign before the draft, but I also said there was no way they're signing a top tier free agent. So
yeah, that's the same thing I kind of felt. Heading into the offseason, when we were doing a free agency mock, neither one of us really thought that the Bengals were going to sign a, big outside free agent. Just the way things looked, you kind of thought they were going to, stick to their own guys that they have in the past, sign guys like Ryan, Von Bell, some of those guys. And then they surprised everybody, get Orlando Brown. Not only is he a outside free agent, he's arguably the biggest free agent in all of free agency. It's crazy. And the whole Mixon situation is kind of weird, just kind of interesting to me. When you look at Mixon, before free agency started, I was not against releasing Mixon because with the post June 1st release, we would save $8 million. And when you look at Mixon, he was terrible this past season. There's no reason he should have played as bad as what he did. And I was so hyping him up so much heading into the past season. I mean, I thought he had potential to get nearly 2,000 total yards. And looking back, I was way off. Like, Mixon had 25% of his rushing yards in just one game last year. And that was a game that's never going to happen again. I don't care what anybody says. Mixon will never have a game like that in his career. That's a game that very, very few running backs have ever in the history of the NFL.
And it was against a really horrible team as well.
And
in the Panthers.
Makes it even worse. I started DJ Moore in fantasy football over Mixon. Mixon had me. It was terrible because like my thing was obviously the Panthers are going to be passing to come back because I mean Moore is going to be getting targets. The Panthers are going to be trailing. I'm a big fan of DJ Moore. Mixon sucked the whole year up to that point. I'm like, I'm going to bench Mixon. He sucked. There's no reason for me to believe that he's going to outplay DJ Moore. The way our point system is, if you have a receiving yard, it's 1 point. If you have a rushing yard, it's 1 point. So Mixon had over 300 more points than DJ Moore. DJ Moore had me like 10 points. I was so tipped off.
Ooh, that hurts me right now.
Yeah, it sucks so bad. And when you look at Mixon, we have a dynasty league. I had McCaffrey, and I traded McCaffrey for Mixon to my dad during the week because that was the week we played the Dolphins. And my thing at that time, McCaffrey was hurt. You didn't know how long he was going to be out. And of course, McCaffrey played that week. I traded for Mixon that week. If I would not have done that trade that week, I would have won. If I would have not have benched Mixon that week, I would have won. 2 games I lost because of Mixon. I was like 4th. If I would have played Mixon that 1 week and not traded to get Mixon the other week, I would have been like 1st. So it sucks. Just another reason why I was just so disappointed in Mixon. But when you look at Mixon, just rushing this past season was terrible. Receiving and targets, I mean, he was great. He had career highs and everything. That was part of the reason why I thought he was going to be so good this past year because we saw in the 2021 season, especially towards the end of the playoff run, he was getting more involved in the pass catching game, and we saw that this past season. But really, when you look at running backs now, it seems like you could get that kind of production from most running backs if you were to draft one. When you look at Mixon, it's weird because, like I said, before free agency, I wasn't against releasing him, but at this point now, I just don't really think it'd be smart because it would be kind of dumb because you can't rely on a guy who's not even on your team yet to be your running back 1 heading into the season. If you had P. Ryan, I feel like you kind of have a little bit more confidence in it, even though P. Ryan is I don't feel like he's a running back number 1 on a team who's contending for a Super Bowl. P. Ryan played good for us this past season. I mean, he had over 100 rushing yards against the Chiefs back in December, but I just don't get releasing Mixon at this point because the absence of P. Ryan. You had the top running back like Robinson or a guy like Gibbs from Alabama, and if you had P. Ryan, maybe I can understand it, but if you were to release Mixon, that first-round pick, if Robinson or Gibbs is there, you're probably going to have to take him. And to me, I didn't really like that because that's not necessarily best player available. I'm always best player available type of deal. So when you look at that, I just feel like there'd be more negatives to releasing Mixon than there is positives. It's really risky, and we could be in another position, a situation where there's another position now that the Bengals really need an upgrade and a need. We already are kind of at tight end. We could still use help and safety. Then if you release Mixon and you're specifically finding your running back in the draft, I just don't feel like that's a good idea because you're going to end up fixating on a position or a player and draft a guy who maybe should have been picked maybe 20 picks after that, something like that. I mean, we fixated on positions several times. I mean, look at Jackson Carman. That pick was freaking terrible. I mean, I don't even really want to get into Billy Price. I hated that pick. It was such a freaking reach. Like, that just made no sense because right now, was the pick before. We could have traded back 10, 15 spots, got Billy Price and a 3rd-round pick, but, we didn't. I'm going off about a rant from a draft that happened 5 years ago. But it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the Bengals fixating players in the draft. I don't want that to really happen by drafting a running back if Mixon is released in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, really from the 2016 draft to the 2019 draft, it has been, in my opinion, more negatives than positives. I mean, look at Zach Taylor's first draft, 2019. Good Lord, that draft was terrible. You have Jermaine Pratt, which was an amazing pick, but what else? You took Jonah Williams, took Drew freaking Sample in the 2nd round. Like, that was a horrible pick then. Worst pick of the draft as soon as he was drafted, and it's even a worse pick now. It's easy. Drew Sample's also a free agent. We didn't even mention him when talking about tight ends because he's just so forgettable. You draft a blocking tight end in the 2nd round, and with all the data suggesting that there's really no room for improvement, like his RAS wasn't all that high. His production wasn't even great. So, I mean, that's just one of the worst Bengals draft picks in history, if you ask me. So, yeah, you get Jermaine Pratt, then just, yeah, other than that, that pick is atrocious. Like I said, 2018, Billy Price, 2017, John Ross. And then obviously I'm glad we have Burrow, but take John Ross over Mahomes, no matter what, at that time, that's a absolutely horrendous pick. Then 2016, William Jackson was an okay player for the Bengals, had a first really good few years, but then he just went downhill so quick. So really, the Bengals drafting well really started in 2020, and it's been a bit of a rough spot. And while I've gained more confidence for the Bengals when it comes to draft, there's an old saying that goes, sign needs, draft talent. You just can't rely on covering team needs in the draft. For example, if both Michael Mayer and Robinson are there at pick 28, let's say you don't want to be taking Robinson because you just failed to sign a running back. You should be wanting to take Mayer there because he's based on, when you consider player value and positional value, Mayer is the better pick there. So, but you don't want the Bengals feeling like they have to take a running back because they messed up in the earlier part of the offseason. So that's why I think they will make those signings. But yeah, you just can't count on covering needs, as you said, for players you don't even know if or will be on the team. And even if you do draft them, they could just be a complete bust. You never know. They may be confident they won't, but we've seen crazy stuff happen. For example, Jackson Carman, like you said, they were so high on him, then that just turned into a disaster. So just, yeah, relying on the draft to cover needs is just something really scary and something that, as you said, draft talent, best player available. That's what the Bengals should be focusing on. So they just need to put themselves in a position before the draft to make sure they can just draft what best player may be available and not reach for need.
100%. And, I've seen so many people say, when you look at mock drafts, in the first round, well, DeJuan Jones from Ohio State, lots of people like him. But I know you're a Ohio State fan, but when you look at players when Bengal fans fixate on, it seems like there's at least one Ohio State player every single year that Bengal fans fixate on just because they played at Ohio State. I mean, there was people who weren't freaking Chase Young or Burrow with the first pick. Like, it's ridiculous. But DeJuan Jones is a great player, but there's a situation, DeJuan Jones or Jackson Smith and Najigba, if he's at 28, that's not even a debate to me. I know Bengal fans will say, oh, well, you need the offensive line, you need to protect Burrow. I don't care. Best player available. Like you said, you signed needs. You signed Orlando Brown. That's something else I think about the Orlando Brown signing is because that takes away the Bengals developing a left tackle. The Bengals cannot develop an offensive lineman to save their freaking life. They might draft DeJuan Jones at 28. They might draft another lineman at 28. But the way the track record has been for Cincinnati really since 2017, 18, around that time frame, really since Whitworth left, they have not developed an lineman to save their life. They're just not good. They haven't developed the one who's been even average. So to me, I'm still on the best player available type of deal, and especially just like if you were to release Mixon, it's so risky. You cannot fixate on a player because the Bengals fixated on Sample. They fixated on Carman. They could have, with trading back with Sample, they could have got him like 2 picks late or 2 rounds later, and they still would have got him. It just made no sense. Like I hated that pick, and I do not want that to happen to the Bengals this year because one screw up with a pick could. I'm not trying to overreact, but one screw up and a mess up, major, mess up with the Bengals in the draft could really, hurt their future and hurt them this year, depending on what you end up doing. Like, you don't want to take a guy who, is a position need over a guy who was 100% without a doubt the best player available. Like, you don't want to reach on a safety if a guy like Jordan Addison's there. I don't care if we have Chase, Boyd, and Higgins. You take Jordan Addison because he's the best player available. Boyd only has 1 year left in this deal. Higgins has 1, but it's really 2 because, if they're not going to get a deal done, he's going to be franchise tag. But still, like, you want to make this team as good as you possibly can. And that's not always the case by drafting a position that you're weak at. You can make a team better by getting the best players available, and that's a reason why the Patriots were so good for as long as what they were. They didn't draft team needs. They got the best player available no matter what. They already had a good running back. Oh, but that running back in the first round, he's by far the best player on the board. Let's take him and get our team better and better and better. That's something that really the Bengals should do, and really all NFL teams should do. I just don't understand why teams don't do it more than what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And like as we talked about, the Bengals just can't just be specifically fixated on those players. Like you said, if they waited a few rounds, Drew Sample's probably there. If the Bengals probably could have waited another round for Carmen. They drafted Carmen over so many better offensive linemen. It's hard to not be frustrated. And when we talk about developing offensive linemen and the fail of, I should say, I think at some point we need to kind of, I don't want to say blame, but kind of mention Frank Pollock. You know, he was here for Marvin's last year, then came back a few years into the Zach Taylor era. Like, Frank Pollock was a Billy Price guy. He banged his fist on the table for him. Really nothing. Jonah Williams, he wasn't drafted by Pollock. He was drafted by the old offensive line coach. His name's blanking. Sorry.
Paul Alexander?
No. That was
it's
the
Jim Turner.
Yes, Turner. Yes, and he obviously Jonah started with him, but he's shown no improvement under Pollock. Carmen's shown no improvement under Pollock. And Pollock's not a wizard, but you think Williams, somebody who has the tools, who played at a high level in college, could be coached to be at least an average lineman in the NFL. He seemed to get worse throughout his time. He's that inconsistent. So it's just at some point we need to keep an eye on Pollock, and the Bengals keep drafting day 1 and 2 offensive linemen. They just continuously to fail. At some point, Frank Pollock needs to be under the scope and held responsible.
And when you look at the Bengals, it's one of those situations where you want to draft a lineman if it can't help your team, and if he's the best on the board, that's fine. But just it's interesting because you don't want to not draft a lineman because your offense linemen have sucked, because eventually you're going to get a good one, and that's just kind of a bad philosophy to not draft one just because you haven't had a good one in a while. But I mean, the track record shows the Bengals cannot develop an offense lineman at all. Like DeJuan Jones, or if you draft a guy in round 1, if he plays right tackle, are you going to have him play until Collins comes back and then have Collins, take over? Or if you're going to have that offensive lineman play right away, then release Collins? To me, I think that's entirely too risky. But it's also so freaking risky because DeJuan Jones is at pick 28. He starts at right tackle. The bye week, let's say it's around 8 or 9, Collins comes back. That is such a freaking confidence killer for a rookie. That's hard to get back. I mean, look at John Ross's rookie year. People don't talk about it much, but John Ross was a bust. But, I mean, early on, that was a confidence killer, when he was getting benched and not playing it, and that's hard to regroup from. You don't want to have a similar situation like that with an offense lineman that you picked your first-round pick on, your most valuable pick in the draft on, get a confidence killer, and then let's say the following offseason you cut Collins or whatever, and then that rookie, Jones or whoever it is at 28, it fails to get his confidence back and then sucks like John Ross. There's good things about drafting a lineman, but there are more bad things. I really feel like people realize if you draft a lineman at 28.
Yeah, no matter what, there's not really an ideal situation for the Bengals. You could, trade, like you said, trade away Jonah, start the rookie, then he gets benched. That doesn't end well. You could just cut Collins start the season and completely rely on the tackle. History tells us for the Bengals that is not the best move, as you mentioned. So it just seems like you could draft him, put him on the bench, be like, hey, we really like you. We're in a bit of a unique situation here with Collins. So if we're going to keep you on the bench now, if there's an injury, we'll put you in. But for now, just because of the situation, you're on the bench. That probably doesn't bode well for the rookie. So there's just a situation where it's just not ideal. They could cut Collins now, trade Jonah, But as we said, just relying on that rookie is so risky. And as history has told us, for the Bengals, that is not something you want to do.
And, we kind of talked about this towards the beginning of the video, but when you look at Jonah Williams, realistically, unless it's a day 2 pick, I don't think he's getting traded. If he's on the Bengals, he's playing right tackle, whether he likes it or not. And I feel like having Williams play right tackle, he is such a left tackle. I don't feel like him switching positions, I don't feel like would be great. But there's no way he could be worse at right tackle than he's been at left tackle. I mean, giving up 23 sacks the last 2 seasons. But Jonah Williams at right tackle, if he plays good, Collins comes back, then maybe you can trade him if he plays decent. A team might need a right tackle towards the trade deadline, a team who might be in playoff contention. But, I mean, that's kind of the bad thing about drafting a lineman in round 1, because if Williams isn't trading, he's going to be a right tackle. If you draft a right tackle, if you have Jonah Williams, and if you have Collins coming back from injury, there is no possible way you could have that 100% success for the Bengals, because, I mean, the rookie will basically set the whole year, because Williams will play. He might get traded, then Collins comes back. Or if he plays great, it would just play out. Like, you don't know what's going to happen at right tackle. Everybody's talking about tight end, safety, running back, like we've kind of mentioned. But right tackle, it's a situation where the Bengals just make one wrong move, it could really set them up for failure. And it's going to be really interesting to see for the draft. And I feel like that's another reason why I'm not fixating on the right tackle at all in the draft. I'm not 100% against it, but I'm more against it than I am for sure.
Yeah, I'm at a point where wouldn't hate it, wouldn't love it. It just really depends what prospect it is. Like, if it is Jones, but there's some really good freaking players we took over because he was an offensive tackle, then I'm not going to mind the pick, or I would not like that pick. But if he was just truly we see him as the best player, he happens to be in our long-term plans and needs, then okay, yeah, that's the draft. That's what you have to do sometimes. But the Bengals can't be fixating on right tackle. They can't be fixating on tight end, running back. What you name the position, they can't be fixating on it. The only proper time it is to fixate on a position is when you have the number 1 pick in the draft and you desperately need a quarterback, and there's an amazing quarterback right there for you. That's the only time you should be fixating. Like, we kind of made a joke about it earlier with, like, the Ohio State fans. There's always that one prospect, which I definitely agree with. Even as an Ohio State fan, I'm like, which is sometimes kind of funny as well, because since, like, I'm somebody who likes to really get into it, I see people hyping them up, and I'm just like confused, or shouldn't say confused, I expect it, but it's just kind of funny and sometimes a little hurtful. Be like, yeah, I really like this guy. I root for him the whole year, but he's a terrible pick here. That's just kind of funny, but there's just I just lost what I was, never mind. But like you kind of made an example of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Yeah, he is such a good pick at 28. Yeah, he may not be the short need, but you put Tyler Boyd, as you mentioned, not too long on his contract. Smith and Jigba, he fights real nicely in that slot. Now, him being there at 28, probably a long way, or probably far-fetched from happening, but, just as we said, the Patriots are so good because they draft best player available. And just we have to see that from the Bengals. They just can't fixate on anything. I think that's where a lot of teams make mistakes in the draft. We've certainly seen the Bengals make that mistake. So they just need to keep an open mind, because while they may not have the world's most needs, they also don't have the world's best depth. So really, either way, if they just play it smart, if they just, like we keep saying, draft best player available, it should be okay. And long term, that will be setting the team up very nicely. So as we just kind of keep saying, this one mistake from the Bengals in this draft, that could have a really bad long-term effect, especially if it is that offensive tackle position. So the Bengals need to be 100% confident and do all the research to avoid any mistakes with the first few rounds of the draft.
And something I hate is, like, the Bengals need to improve their offensive line, all that crap. Like Orlando Brown signing was huge. Like obviously it was one of the biggest free agency signings the Bengals have ever had. Arguably the biggest, signing they've had when it comes to, top tier free agent. But when you look at the Bengals, I mentioned earlier, their offensive line in the second half of the year was good. It was not talked about enough. They played very, very good. And when you look at the Bengals, it's like you have Orlando Brown, you have your starters coming back. I don't know why you need to fixate on an offensive lineman. Like this offensive line was good. Burrow wasn't getting sacked a ton towards the end of the season. People only love to point out when Burrow gets sacked a lot. People love to talk about the Steelers game, the Cowboys game, and the Chiefs game in the playoffs, in the Ravens game in the playoffs, because those were the games he got sacked the most. But when you look at this offensive line, it isn't bad. I just feel like fixating on offensive line prospect will not be smart. I just don't get this idea where it's coming from that this Bengals offensive line sucks. It's not great by any means. It's not terrible by any means. I would say that towards the end of the season, it was good. Like, it's much better than people think. You add Linda Brown in that mix, it's going to be even better. I don't feel like you need to kind of stop with the offensive lineman talk at 28, unless it's a clear-cut best guy. But it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out with the Bengals. I just hope that they make the smartest decision, best player available. They don't screw it up like Drew Sample, Billy Price, all these top picks that they had before. Track record shows the Bengals are either going to get a home run or they're going to have a complete strikeout. There's no really in between. But you kind of mentioned the only time you should take best player, you should take a team need is at the first pick. Obviously, that crazy dumb trade the Panthers made by acquiring the first pick for the Bears. I know lots of people think Anthony Richardson is going to be the first pick. I just don't. I'm a Florida fan. I don't see this crap at all. Like, where is the hype? What is the deal about Anthony Richardson? When, like, I liked Tyree Jackson from Buffalo a lot. Like, I would rather have Tyree Jackson. To me, was a better college quarterback than Anthony Richardson. I know it's a hot take. Tyree Jackson had so much potential. He wasn't really given a chance. Anthony Richardson's the complete same player, just more mobile, has a little bit more arm talent. He could be the first pick. I just don't understand it. 100% give me CJ Stroud, give me Bryce Young over Richardson 100% of the time. And, lots of people saying, oh, they traded up to get Richardson, they traded up to get Young. Honestly, I think of Stroud. When you look at Bryce Young, he did not participate in some of the things at the combine. When you look at Richardson, I just don't know why any team would actually trade up and get him. Like, it's such a risky move. I mean, if he's taken, I feel like he could be a bust, and this could be one of the worst trades in NFL history. CJ Stroud, to me, of the three, I feel like he's the most complete quarterback. I think he's the best. I think he has the most potential. And he had a really nice pro day. I mean, when you look at Bryce Young didn't do nothing to improve his stock because he didn't do hardly anything at the combine. When you look at Richardson, I mean, he had a 40-yard dash. So what? To me, when you look at a quarterback, you have to look at his accuracy and his IQ and stuff like that. I mean, having a fast quarterback doesn't mean crap unless he's, accurate and stuff like that. But to me, I feel like Stroud's going to be the first pick just based on his combine performance. He has the most experience of the quarterbacks. I think he's most pro ready. And I feel like it would be the smartest selection by the Panthers to get Stroud at number one compared to Anthony Richardson and Bryce Young.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't even buy that it's going to be Richardson. Like, I just don't think that's a possible scenario even. Nor do I think it's going to be Levis. Not that he's really gotten any connection, I guess you could say, to Carolina. It's mainly been the big three and not Levis. But I think it's Stroud if I had to pick. I agree with you. Like, you watch that championship game. I mean, look, he looked like Joe Burrow to an extent that game. Extending plays, his anticipation was great, breaking sacks, pocket awareness. Like, he's what you're looking like, what teams want in an NFL quarterback. Bryce Young, yeah, there are some questions. You could argue that overall and consistently he had the better game tape, but I mean, like, people may not like it, but being under 6 feet tall is a legitimate concern in the NFL. It's a fair one. And all he did at the combine was drink a bunch of water to gain some weight. And you already know he's going to have to lose that weight before the season starts. Teams aren't being fooled by that. It happens every year. And Stroud, right now between the end of last season and just how he's been performing in this offseason, I do think he'll be the number one overall pick. And I think he also fits best in what Reich and the rest of the Panthers offense will look like. I think he's the perfect quarterback for that system.
And when you look at the combine, I feel like I think I messaged you about it. I feel like the combine is just such an overreaction. Every single year, it gets more and more people overreact. Just it's ridiculous. Game film is what you should be looking at, not what a 40-yard dash shows, not what throwing a 50-yard deep ball with no man-to-man corner, and a tight window pass or anything like that. When you look at Richardson and when you look at Stroud could have. That was a perfect opportunity to have his best game of his career. He played freaking amazing. That was the perfect time ever to have that game because that helped him possibly be the number one pick. Now let's look at Anthony Richardson, a guy who played 12 games for Florida this past year, setting out the bowl game to help his draft stock and prepare for the draft. Like, that makes a difference. Like, I just don't understand. When you look at Anthony Richardson, I don't even think he had a touchdown to interception ratio of 2-1. He played freaking terrible. It was 3 or 4 games. He had a completion percentage of less than 50%. That is insane. And we're talking about this guy could possibly be the first pick. Like, this is ridiculous. When you look at completion percentage, it drops a significant amount going to from college to the pros. When you look at Richardson, I think it's like 56 or something like that. Based on when you look at stats and different quarterbacks, based on what it is, his completion percentage would be about 50%. And that's who you could possibly, be taking number one or top 5. I just don't understand it. Like, it's crazy to me, this hype and obsession with Anthony Richardson. This past season, heading into the year for Florida, there was talks, Richardson could possibly be a dark horse, candidate for the Heisman. He played like crap, and he still could be the first pick. I just don't understand this. I like Florida. I like Richardson, but the hype for him is just dumb. I just don't think he's worthy of being the first pick, a top 5 pick, a top 10 pick. It's crazy. But, when you look, kind of switching gears, kind of staying on the same topic, when you look at the Ravens right now, when you look at Lamar Jackson, there's some talks that he wants out of the Ravens. I will say, if the Ravens and Jackson do not, have a deal in place and if Jackson does not play for Baltimore's upcoming season, could you imagine Anthony Richardson on the Ravens? To me, that is where I could say, like, holy crap. Like, he could be insanely good. But that's the only really scenario where I could see him playing absolutely great because, we talk about it all the time. The Ravens have a certain scheme where your quarterback has to be mobile. They're going to have blocking tight ends. They value blocking tight ends more than wide receivers. Anthony Richardson is kind of like a Lamar Jackson, but he's much, much better when it comes to an arm. He's not as accurate, but he has potential if you would have maybe Anthony Richardson set a year and then take over with Baltimore just to what their scheme is and, the players that they have. I feel like Richardson could be great for Baltimore, and then like a Richardson can pan out just half of what people think he'd be. I would be, I'm not going to say nervous about Baltimore, but I would be more scared of them then than I am, this year, last year, this upcoming year. But Richardson with Baltimore would be a perfect fit. It's not going to happen, but any other team to me, I just don't think it makes sense to, have your top pick go for a guy, getting Richardson who has, I think, 4 games with less than a 50% completion percentage in a game this year.
Yeah, I think it's only like 2 quarterbacks in history have improved their completion percentage in the NFL compared to college. So when you put that in percentage, that is less than 1%, less than 0.1% when you consider all the day 3 picks and all that. So analytically speaking, it is almost nearly impossible for that completion percentage to go up. Obviously, it is possible. And one of the quarterbacks who did it improve their completion percentage was Josh Allen. But I think it's stuff like that teams need to realize when they're about to take their franchise quarterback. The odds of him improving his completion percentage and becoming more accurate, even if there are some form issues they get fixed, it's just not very likely. You're going to see better accuracy, more completions. So if I'm a team deciding on a pick, for a quarterback here. Those numbers scare me away. I try to not be too much of a stat scouter, but there are just times where you do have to key in on those stats and see and compare them to NFL stuff of what numbers have a positive trajectory and which ones have a negative. He has a lot of negative number trajectories.
And when you look at the 2021 season for Florida, that was a very disappointing year. Muschamp got fired. During that season, after they lost to Missouri, Emory Jones was terrible. There was talks about him being, really good that year. Lots of people wanted Richardson to start over Emory Jones. Emory Jones that season was 100% more accurate than Anthony Richardson was this past season. It's not a crazy take. When you watch the film, it's the truth. Like, he's not accurate at all to save his life. I'm just going based on the top of my head. I'm thinking he was 13 of 39 or something like that when they played Florida State. 33% completion percentage against Florida State. I could be wrong, but that's just the top of my head. But he's had those multiple performances like that heading into this past season with Florida. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Richardson, Stroud, and Young, because I think it's going to be Stroud, like you said, you think it's going to be too. So you don't know where some of these other quarterbacks are going to go. But the draft is just barely over a month away. Like, I know we kind of talked about before we started recording, WrestleMania does not seem like it's a couple weeks away. The draft does not seem like it's 1 month away at all. Like, I've not been, up in the draft in years past. It's just weird because I feel like, prior to the 2021 season for the Bengals, the draft was our Super Bowl. But now the fact that we actually know what the Super Bowl is like, I'd much rather be in a Super Bowl than have my Super Bowl be the draft and pick 7th or something like that. It's so weird. Just a couple years can change. Like, I used to be all over the draft and stuff like that. I'm still into it, but just not as much when you're picking, 30th, 28th compared to like top 5. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and also the draft and combine come up on us a lot quicker now. We've been so used to early January season's done. Now we're just waiting on draft and free agency. Now that's not a situation. We're making it deep into the playoffs. And the combine starts in a few weeks. Didn't even realize because we're spending the majority of our time focusing on the Bengals and not the draft, when obviously in years past it's like, well, let's find out who's going to attempt to change this franchise, and then we would start to get our hopes up. But we just haven't had that problem, and obviously as a hobby, I'm disappointed I haven't scouted more, but this is a good problem for the Bengals and us fans to have. It just comes up quicker because it means our team is more successful.
For sure, when you look at the 2019 season, I remember people doing mock draft videos in October. Like, now you don't do mock draft videos, it seems like, for the Bengals until like at least a week after the season's over with, which has been in February, late January. It's just kind of crazy what a couple years can do for the Bengals. With the draft coming up a little over a month away. Like I said, we're WrestleMania a couple weeks away. I know some people aren't really as hyped or into WrestleMania this year compared to years past. I've been trying, I'll occasionally watch it. I always record Raw. I'll normally watch a Rollins match or an Elias segment or something that just kind of catches my eye, like an Austin Theory match. But to me, when I look at WrestleMania, there's 2 storylines that I really have my attention. I know lots of people like the Bloodline story. I like it, but I really, really am intrigued by the Austin Theory and Cena storyline. I just think it's so good. It's so smart by the WWE because, WrestleMania is in Los Angeles, Hollywood. Cena's going to have attentions of people who maybe don't watch wrestling. When you look at Cena, some of the movies that he's been in recently, different, things and films that he's been in, people are going to watch WrestleMania who aren't wrestling fans because, maybe they like Cena from a movie they've seen him in. And then be like, oh, who's this Austin Theory guy who is extremely underrated to me? And I feel like having Theory going up against Cena is just so smart because people watching you going into the match, you're having these people, they want to watch Cena, but after the match, you're like, holy crap, this Austin Theory guy is really, really good. And they start watching it. And then I just think it makes so much sense because Theory is a guy, I think he could be one of the top people in WWE for the next decade. And I'm interested in the match. I feel like, I know the segment a week or so ago, it's only really been only segment face-to-face between them two. but I thought it was good. I thought it was really, well produced and everything. I think I read something that said Cena produced that segment. That's part of the reason why it was so good to me. But another storyline I'm very intrigued by is Logan Paul and Seth Rollins. Logan Paul, I'm not really a big fan of him. Holy freaking crap. For a non-wrestler, he's freaking amazing. It's so crazy. And whenever he's not had a bad match since he's been in the WWE. I mean, he's a better wrestler than like a decent amount of people in AEW and a decent amount of people in WWE, people who have wrestled for years. And a guy like Logan Paul, who's had just a couple of matches under his belt, he's better than some of them already. And it's crazy. Obviously, being a WWE fan, you know how crazy and how good Seth Rollins is. He's one of the best wrestlers in the world. Logan Paul and Seth Rollins is going to steal the show at WrestleMania. I think it's going to be the match of WrestleMania night 1 or night 2. But I cannot wait for that match. I feel like they've done a great job considering, the lack of, times Logan Paul has been on Raw. They've done a tremendous job of building up this storyline. I'm really, really interested in those two. But I'm actually kind of, excited for WrestleMania this year. Kind of the first I have been in a couple of years, honestly.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on the theory on both of them. Starting with the theory, Cena. I didn't know Cena kind of coordinated that promo, but that absolutely doesn't surprise me. John went off, and obviously it seems like Theory what is in over his head. That's part of the story. So when the big underdog beats somebody on the WWE Mount Rushmore, he is going to get over, and I kind of feel bad for Theory because when he first started, he was being pushed down our throats in a storyline where Vince was pushing down our throats, where Vince basically hasn't learned his history from the past. He's like, okay, I'm going to push somebody down their throat again, and this time I'm going to even do it more. But then thankfully Triple H came in and kind of, I don't want to say saved because he was still doing really well, but got a proper fan reaction. Like when he was getting booed at first, he was getting booed because people didn't like Vince McMahon and somebody about to be shown too much. But now people boo him just because he started playing a great heel. Theory is absolutely amazing at this. He's just 24 years old. Everything you said was right. He is amazing. He's going to be running this company for so long, being one of the top heels. No matter, he's going to be in championship feuds, whether it's a 1 month feud where he just loses but the other guy over, or no matter what it is, he's going to be involved in those just because of how good he is. And so for him to really put him over at WrestleMania, that is just going to put him into a higher gear, and he already has a lot of momentum. Then a few weeks before Crown Jewel, we kind of talked about Logan Paul and the business decision of him facing Roman Reigns at Crown Jewel. And this is another business decision, dare I say, because, he's got the followers. This feud started on social media, which really worked because that's Logan Paul's, I guess you could say, title if you had to give him one title over his career. So that makes sense. And you're absolutely right. He is so good at it. And something else that WWE has done that they should have done every time before was make him a heel, because a heel Logan Paul is just so much better than a face Logan Paul. Not that I think he was bad as his face run with Roman Reigns, but in his segment with Seth Rollins, not this past Monday, but the one before, he just said, I'm just better at it. But I don't even do this full time, and I'm just better at it than everybody. And he got massive boos, which is a proper heel reaction. But people also know there's truth to that. If he was a full-time wrestler, he would be one of the best in that locker room. So just everything in those segments really work, and it really doesn't hurt anybody, whoever wins or loses. I say that if Theory loses, that would hurt, but I don't see a situation where he loses.
And when you look at Logan Paul, this might be an overreaction. The Logan Paul signing has already been a better signing than the Ronda Rousey signing. Ronda Rousey signing with WWE, there was so much hype at the time. Holy crap, Ronda Rousey is signing with WWE. That's such a big deal. It's going to put more eyes in the product. She's freaking terrible. She can't have a promo to save her life. She's been a terrible wrestler. She just cannot do anything good. She's not a good actor. She's never been really in a good storyline. Look at Logan Paul. He's a great wrestler. He's not bad in promos. You think for a guy who, has really no wrestling experience, he'd kind of be bad in promos, but he's pretty decent at it. And it's just already been better than the Ronda Rousey experiment that WWE kind of pushed in our throats to begin with. There was so much hype around it. Logan Paul has already been 100 times better than anything that Ronda Rousey has done in the WWE. But I don't know. WrestleMania is just very, interesting when you look at Logan Paul and Rollins, Cena, and Theory. The main one I'm not really a fan of is Omos and Lesnar. I just don't get that. To me, there's been rumors about Vince McMahon, being back at head creative, and something like that I could see why that rumor makes sense, because Omos is another guy that kind of Vince McMahon was kind of pushing down the throats a little bit. How he has, obsessions with like big, tall people who are wrestlers, and Omos and Lesnar. I just don't get that. When you look at Omos, they paired him up with AJ Styles a couple years ago. And in wrestling, you hide people's weakness. You hide them. If they're a bad promo, if they're a guy who is bad at promos, you have them have a manager, kind of like how Paul Heyman, with Lesnar. If you're a bad wrestler, you might be in a tag team match, and that's exactly what happened with Omos and Styles. Styles did most of the wrestling, so they could kind of hide Omos' weakness, but also building him up, being paired with AJ Styles, and Omos is a terrible wrestler. I just don't get Omos and Lesnar. To me, that's probably the biggest question mark of WrestleMania with Omos and Lesnar. But aside from that, I feel like it's not as bad as a card that people are making out to be.
Yeah, so that, and it sounds like Brock Lesnar is actually the one who kind of pushed for that match. Like, it was reported he was personally very happy that this match is going to be happening. And as we know, Brock Lesnar is a Vince McMahon guy, so it's not overly surprising Brock Lesnar has a Vince McMahon idea type match, because he's been with him and listened to him so long. So yeah, I'm not really excited for that match. Like, I will give all Brock Lesnar MVP and almost credit, especially MVP. He's been doing such an incredible job trying to hype this up. WWE's given him basically nothing. But on an episode of the MVP show, he actually got me excited for the match for a minute. Then I came back into reality, but there's really no winner or loser of this draft. Like, whoever wins wins. Whoever loses, lose. Obviously, the crowd favorite is Brock Lesnar. If you ask me, I think it should be Omos who wins, but it really doesn't matter in this situation. It's just hard to get too excited for. And a few of the other matches I'm not overly excited about. This is because they were just put in last minute. There's 2 fatal 4-way tag team matches, one with the guys, one with the girls, and they're just tag team matches. There's really no story here. I'm not mad at it, because wrestling's just trying to get more stars in WrestleMania, show off more talent. No, I'm never going to be mad at WWE trying to do that. Get a few more of those mid cards on a larger audience. That can really help a wrestler. So I'm not overly excited for those stories, but that's just because they were put in last minute. So it's hard to be excited, but when you see some of the talent, like, I think I'm a huge Chad Gable fan. I think he is one of the most underrated guys. And, kind of mentioning covering weaknesses, his tag team with Otis. Otis, love him. He has a lot of weaknesses. He is with Gable because Gable is spectacular. And now they made a random 4-way tag team match. Gable is in that, and he finally has a chance to in front of a huge audience to show just how good he is. Because Gable, there's a few guys who can pull off losing a ton and their reputation not being hurt. Gable's one of those guys. So just to see guys like him who have to take a lot of losses, who work their ass off to get a match in WrestleMania, and on the women's side, like Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez, I'm just really happy that they will get a chance to wrestle at WrestleMania, even if it's a no-story match.
And when you look at WrestleMania, I feel like this is maybe more so this year compared to years past. Logan Paul is going to get eyes in the match just because of his name. Cena's going to get eyes in the match just because of his name. You have Austin Theory, people going to watch a guy who's going to be your top star, like we mentioned. Seth Rollins has already been a top star in WWE for pretty much a decade now. And, him going up against Logan Paul, that can get even more eyes on Seth Rollins. With having Paul and Cena, has potential to get, tons of more people and more viewers for wrestling. And I just feel like, Logan Paul, WWE signing Logan Paul, some people didn't like it. It's the best signing WWE has made in years. It was just so smart. It's just you have to, I guess, realize new generation and stuff, guys with social media and stuff like that who's on pretty much everything. And I just feel like, it was a great signing by WWE. And it's going to be interesting with, WrestleMania, Paul against Seth Rollins, Theory against Cena, Reigns against Cody Rhodes. It's crazy to think it's already been about a year Cody Rhodes has been in the WWE. Like, that just does not seem real at all.
Yeah, and it sucks. Sorry.
Oh, you go ahead.
I was just saying it sucks he was injured, and that's kind of part of the reason why time has flown. Right as soon he was getting really, really hot, a ton of momentum off finishing his Seth Rollins feud, it has to go away. And I'm still amazed at how he wrestled that match with his torn pec. Even if he never has a good match again, obviously he will. But if that never happens again, he will forever have my respect and appreciation after that match.
That was absolutely crazy, wrestling against Rollins, in that match. And when you look at WrestleMania, everybody's talking about, matches and stuff, but you also look at the people who are coming back soon. You don't know where Matt Riddle is going to fit into the situation, with him going to come back from a suspension soon. Orton's, probably going to be coming back soon. You don't know if they're going to have, maybe Orton turn on Matt Riddle. Kind of makes sense, I would say, have a storyline for both of them. It's going to be very interesting with WrestleMania, kind of talking about the Bengals free agency signings, some targets for Cincinnati. Jonah Williams requesting a trade from Cincinnati. Just kind of, bunch of different stuff. I mean, we're talking about WrestleMania, me going on a rant about Billy Price pick from 5 years ago, why I lost fantasy football because I did not play Mixon over DJ Moore. But can you kind of tell some of the listeners, where they can follow you and, check you out, Braeden?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me at Instagram, Bengals_NFL. That's where I am the most active. You can also follow me on Twitter. It's Bengals_action. You'll see Bengals NFL as the profile name. And on there, I tweet about the Bengals, obviously a fair amount, but I also post a decent amount about WWE and also Marvel and DC movies. And you can also check out my YouTube page. That is just my name, Braeden Guthrie. And I do Bengals there, and I also do a little WWE and Marvel is there as well. But on all the pages, it is Bengals themed.
Definitely go check out, Braeden, all those, things that he mentioned. Make sure to go put the links in the description below. Follow him on Instagram, Twitter, subscribe to his YouTube channel. If you're new to the channel or you've seen my videos before, I would appreciate it if you could like this video and subscribe to my channel. Follow me, the Sports Dude Hines Show, on Instagram and Dude Hines Show on Twitter. I thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time on the Sports Dude Hines Show.